This bank catfishing guide will show you the best baits to catch each species, common mistakes to avoid, proven techniques to catch them every time, and each species' behavior that you need to know. Let's dive in. Let's start with what each of these guys eats. The best bait to catch flathead catfish is live bait, hands down. Bluegill, shad, and bullheads are their favorites, but they gotta be lively and active in the 7 to 8 inch size, preferably, to catch bigger fish. And their second choice would be live crayfish, especially if you're fishing in very rocky or weedy areas. Just make sure using live bait is legal where you live. The best bait to catch blue catfish is cut bait, which is simply cut up pieces of perch, bluegill, shad, or herring in the 6 to 8 inch range. The combination of oils and natural scents from the fish insides will drive blues crazy. Second choice would be gizzard shad. Both live and cut bait make excellent choices for the biggest of blues. The best baits to catch channel catfish in every river, pond, or lake is chicken liver, from its strong, bloody scent, and large night crawlers from their wiggle and movement, and stink baits, which are specially formulated doughs, pastes, and dips that attract channels in from about 100 yards away with their strong and pungent odor. And the best baits to catch bullheads are chicken liver and night crawlers, just like with channels, and frozen cheese-filled hot dogs work wonders for them from the combination of fat, salt, protein, and cheese. Homemade dough balls also work on the bottom for bullheads made out of flour, cornmeal, cheese, and chicken or liver. So do you want to get better at catfishing? Then here are some common mistakes to avoid so that you can perfect your skills and up your chances of more catfish every time. First off, you need to have the right gear and equipment when you're going catfishing. These fish can get huge and will always put up a great fight. You never want to have gear that is too light for the job. We always recommend you use an 8 to 9 foot heavy catfish rod with a very strong backbone that'll help you cast out farther to the deepest sections of the lake where the biggest catfish hide out. And your reel should have a large line capacity that can handle at least 150 to 200 yards spooled of heavy moss green colored braided line. And we always recommend at least 30-pound braid every time. That's because when you're bottom fishing for catfish, you will also be catching mean snapping turtles that can weigh 40 to 50 pounds and break your line and rod right in half like a pretzel. And the second big mistake is that many catfishermen hide the circle hook completely within the bait to conceal it. Don't do that. You don't have to worry about fooling catfish. First off, we always recommend using blood red hooks, at which point you want them to see the hook because red is the color of blood and imitates wounded or dying prey, which science has proven will absolutely trigger more strikes, especially in predatory fish like catfish. But also because hiding a hook in the bait will more times than not prevent you from getting a good hook set, and he'll just run away with your clump of bait. And third is location. Location is key to catching more catfish. You've heard us say over and over to fish where the fish are, right? That will always improve your chances of catching more catfish every time. Catfish, like bass and other fish, prefer deep holes, underwater structure like logs and sunken trees and rock piles, undercut banks, and areas in rivers with slower moving water. Don't fish in open water for catfish. That will almost always skunk you. You gotta fish in the catfish's habitat to catch them. Fourth is to know the weather and water conditions. Catfish, just like bass, have lateral lines, and they're very sensitive to barometric pressure changes and impending cold fronts or severe weather. So just keep an eye on the weather to know the best times to go out fishing. And on a hot summer day, you almost always need to put your baits in the deepest holes where they will be to stay cooler and hide in structure to ambush prey. Fifth, and very common with catfishing, is an improper hook set. Let me be very clear about this. There is a misnomer in catfishing that many beginners take too literally, and that is you're not supposed to set the hook with an octopus circle hook when landing a catfish because it magically hooks itself every time. Nonsense. Yes, the circle hook is designed to turn into the corner of the catfish's mouth as opposed to gut hooking him. But as soon as you feel a little pull or pressure on the line and the cat is committed to taking the bait, then you gently set the hook just like with any other fish and you'll have him landed every time. It doesn't need to be a super aggressive hook set, but just gentle enough to get the hook lodged into his bony cartilage jaw. Sixth, and just as important as all the above, is using the wrong bait for the fish you're after. You have to better understand each species of catfish's preferred foods and preferences. For example, for blue catfish, like we talked about, large chunks of cut bait are their number one. And for flatheads, it's a live bluegill, if it's legal to use it. Channels and bullheads, chicken liver, like we talked about. Finally, being stubborn and not learning from your mistakes will cost you from catching more fish every time. Catfish are a creature of habit. They're scavengers. They do eat just about anything, but you have to be willing to adapt to weather, water, and temperature conditions, and changes in the seasons when their feeding patterns change. Learn what worked in each lake you fish. Keep a fishing journal, the baits you used, what you caught, what the barometer was, wind direction, water and air temperature, etc. Jot it down for the next time you're fishing at that lake. All these things will improve your chances of having a more successful and enjoying catfishing experience every time you head out. Okay, now let's go over the best techniques catfishermen use to catch them in a variety of conditions, whether you're out on a lake or pond fishing, fishing from shore, or out on a boat or riverbank fishing like we're talking about here. First and foremost, whenever and wherever you're catfishing, you want to be fishing your baits on the bottom or just off the lake floor. Catfish are bottom feeders, period. They're scavengers, and you'll have the best chance of catching more fish every time you fish your bait on the bottom. The easiest and most effective rig for getting your baits on the bottom is a simple slip sinker rig, or they call it a modified Carolina rig, with a 1 or 2 ounce sinker or heavier if you need to weight the line down. And then there's a Santee Cooper rig, which is a slip sinker rig, except you add a peg float if you want the bait suspended a few inches off the floor. And another really great way to catch catfish in rivers and out on lakes when you're boat fishing is drift fishing, which simply lets your bait drift naturally with the water, current, and wind. Lots of catfishermen use a 3-way rig as the best setup to catch catfish, especially in deeper water. Of course, this allows you to cover a lot of water and can be very effective, especially when you're in deeper, larger lakes, reservoirs, and rivers. The concept is exactly the same when you're drift fishing. You cast your bait out into the deepest sections of the lake, near drop-offs and ledges that you can identify in your depth finder, and just let it drift along the bottom. You could put out multiple lines with different baits, and that increases your catching catfish more each time. Okay, now let's wrap up with a little bit about how each species of catfish reacts to different weather patterns, pressure changes, and seasonal variations, so we can adapt our techniques, baits, and approach for the optimal success. So once we get into late fall and the weather and water temperatures get much colder, catfish, who are cold-blooded, generally become much less aggressive and active in cold water due to a decrease in their metabolism rate. What this means in simple English is they definitely feed less often and may become more lethargic, oftentimes not wanting to chase bait if it isn't directly in their line of sight. Also, during cold fronts, catfish move into deeper water where their water temperature is more stable. The blue catfish is known to be much more tolerant of colder water temperatures than all other species of catfish. They may still be found in deeper water and may be a little less active feeding, but by far, they're the most likely to feed during cold water temperatures than their cousins. Contrary to blues, the flatheads are very sensitive to water temperature changes and become very sluggish during colder water. They retreat into the deepest and warmest water they can find. They may not even feed for a week until these conditions stabilize. Channel catfish are kind of in the middle of blues and flats. They do become a little less active in cold water and weather, and they will flock to the deepest sections of the lake, but they may still feed aggressively on easier prey in shallower water without having to spend too much energy. Lots of people ask us how barometric pressure affects catfish behavior. So here are the facts. When the barometer is falling, catfish generally become much more active and tend to feed more frequently and aggressively. When the barometer is rising, this pressure increase can make the catfish tend to retreat to deeper water, and they usually become less active feeding. Go get 'em, gang. Have fun catfishing. Catch a big one for us. Okay, folks, thanks for watching. Please like this video, hit the subscribe button before you leave, and don't forget to enable your bell notifications so you never miss another great video coming your way.